Good morning, good morning. All right, I'm going to ask that our panelists make their way to the front. I'm super excited. Again, my name is Cassie Benton. Pronouns are she and her. I'm part of the peer-to-peer team. I'm about to graduate. And I'm just super excited to be here, super jazzed to hear everyone's stories and experience. This panel is made up of some amazing people who I got a little bit to read their bio, but I'm just going to step back and allow them to share bits and pieces about themselves. This is an opportunity for them to share their experience in various settings, whether that's professional or academic or just their life experience, and what it means, kind of like how they got to be here and things that they just kind of want to let you know. I do have some just like basic questions, but honestly, y'all run the show. And then we also want to open it up towards the end to the opportunity to you all who are out here that came to hear these beautiful and amazing people. So if you have any questions, there is going to be like a few mic runners in the room, so please don't hesitate to raise your hand and let folks know. And since you opened the flood doors about if you want to hear some more about my love triangle story and drama, I'm just, I like a little tea every now and then. So I'm also excited to hear maybe some things that, don't volunteer unless you want me to ask. So we have Ivy, we have Chinue, we have Kay, and of course, D'Angela. And you all can feel free to introduce yourselves, share your pronouns, share your story. I asked you all questions earlier of what does mental health and solidarity look like, sound like, feel like to you? We've already kind of heard a little bit about what transformative space can look like and feel like. So if you kind of want to just share a little bit more about yourself, your experience, and then we'll take it from there.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Chinui, she, her pronouns. I'm one of the mental health counselors at the Berkeley City College Wellness Center. I'm an associate. And was the question, what does solidarity and mental health mean to me? Yeah, okay. Well, what I shared with Cassie earlier, the first three things that came to my mind were deep listening and trust. I think there's something when I think about safety where, I feel received, I feel heard, I feel seen. I also think, really there's a lot of identities, there's a lot of communities that are not my own. And I think being able to really listen and learn from the experiences of people who, aren't like myself is crucial, and ideally them doing the same for me. And I think community is a huge part of solidarity, right? Really building community, cross-pollinating with other communities. And ideally, universal health care would also be nice in terms of solidarity with mental health. But yeah, maybe I'll stop there and pass it to Ivy.
Hi, my name is Ivy. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 18, and for 23 months, I lived in mental health facilities. I lived in Utah for most of that time, and a lot of what I learned about creating solidarity and creating a system of a network of people that you can trust is just a willingness to be both casual and vulnerable and intertwine when you need it, because there's a kind of a wear and tear you experience after you do this much treatment where you just get I've done enough therapy, I've done so much that I just get tired of it. And it was learning that you need to be smart sometimes with how often you talk about it, how you talk about it, because telling your story over and over and over again can get very much tiring and makes you feel I should not have to repeat myself so often. You try to get yourself into spaces where people don't question as much, where they just are chill about it, because otherwise you can get stuck in places where it just feels like a loop. You're on a hamster wheel, always doing the same things over and over again, and it's just not fun. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Kay. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a student here. I'm the vice president of the LGBTQIA club here. It's our first year, so yeah. Thank you. Thank you. For me, like I discussed with Cassie over email, solidarity and mental health is mostly just like respect, regardless of like differentiating views. Like everyone goes through things. Obviously, this is a summit for like safe spaces for queer faces, but like mental health is something that everyone, regardless of their different identities, can like goes through. So I think like solidarity is just recognizing that and respecting that in every space. Like I can go to therapy or a psychiatrist, and regardless of if they may not share my same viewpoints or relate to my identities, they can still recognize that and empathize or sympathize with me. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there are many answers, but I think the first thing I think is for mental health. Since I'm a clinician, I'll be getting licensed in a couple of months, actually. So it's been a long road. But that mental health field, realizing that this isn't new in our communities, and that mental health is something that we just created, is a westernized, concept, and there has been ancient old wisdom that has already been here around mental health that has existed. And for us to acknowledge that and integrate it more in our modalities, our traditional modalities. And then two, as a clinician, I think for solidarity with our clients in particular is to do our own work on ourselves. Because oftentimes we're working ourselves out on our clients.
How has the need to be cautious about your identity impacted your mental health? How has the need to be cautious about your identity impacted your mental health? Whoever wants to start.
I grew up in a family that was, liberal, Berkeley liberal, which means I'll tell you I'm liberal, but I'm actually going to hide how I feel about certain points until you talk about them. And then I'll just get annoying about it, and then you're just like, I give up. Trying to explain why that's wrong, but I've learned that I might not always be able to tell people who I am 100%. I'm not going to always have a fully safe space in every place I go to, and it's the realization that if I want to be the safest person, I have to be strong enough to understand that not everybody's going to care, not everybody's going to be accepting. It's a willingness to walk alone when you need to, but also realize that the more you walk alone, the more you're used to it, and the more and more you become insular. That it's about balancing that out and realizing we all need places to go to talk, we all need places and people to talk to, but it's going to be hard for some people to find them, and it's just trying to build that community up with people you don't have to be scared to talk to about your problems and your identity and who you are. It's just so important.
Can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry.
How has the need to be cautious about your identity impacted your mental health?
Oh, yeah, that's such a great question. Honestly, I think like vigilance, hypervigilance, when we're like constantly having to move through space and assess like, am I okay here? Am I going to be okay here? We're constantly having to navigate, the potential for discrimination, the potential for rejection. I have no doubts that sends our cortisol levels up, right? And so we move in these heightened states of stress, and I can certainly see how for myself, like, I have anxiety, I have, other mental health things, and I would be remiss not to consider that the various forms of oppression and the systems we live under play a role in those conditions. And so I can certainly see how my identities as a queer person, a masculine of center person, a Black woman, and, living in those identities and moving through a world that does not always care or uplift or hold, definitely has impacted my mental health and continues to.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything she said. Stress is such a big thing, but I think for me as well, like realizing that even the people closest to me aren't going to be super accepting or just completely disregard my identities, and then just the impact that has on me, depressed, angry, and also realizing how anxious I get when I go into new spaces, like applying for jobs and things like that. It's really difficult. So. Yeah.
Yeah, so, for me, I think that the main mental health stressor for me was my mother, because I was taught to be very confident and, I had a very close-knit family. And then when I really realized that I was gay, she started to kind of disown me and pulled out of paying my college tuition my last semester I was supposed to graduate. And that was stressful. And I think that for me, trying to make things make sense to her, because she was dating my father, who was a preacher, and he was married, and she was having an affair. And trying to be like, well, a sin's a sin, right? Right? If you're saying what I'm saying is a sin. And so I think that my mother, one thing she said to me was like, well, I'm worried about you being gay because how the world's going to treat you. And I said, well, you know what? You're the only one that has treated me that way so far. And that has been tough. It's gotten a lot better, but that has been an uphill battle for me.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, hold on to this one. First of all, thank you all for sharing. Let's see. You actually kind of brought this up, so I want to go ahead and speak on it. But how has a lack of acceptance or knowledge about your identity ever made you reconsider a life goal or plan?
I guess I can start. Yeah. Well, one thing about me, I do want to go into education. So I guess when I started thinking about that as well, one of the things I was thinking of, I was like, what do people call me? They call me by my name. I don't like Miss or Mister. It makes me feel uncomfortable. There's a lot of lack of inclusive vocabulary. I had a teacher in high school, mixed fan, and everyone behind her back made fun of her. She used she/they pronouns, but she preferred mixed fan, and I just was like, why do you guys make fun of her? They prefer that, and so I was just really conscious about that, and I still am. Applying to jobs, I have a job right now at a cafe, and it's like using my dead name to apply, and then once I start finding a way to tell them, hey, can you call me by this name instead? Can you not use she/her pronouns? It's really uncomfortable conversation, especially when your boss is like a 50-year-old bald white man. So I think just things like that, like trying to find the balance of who can I talk to, when is it safe to be myself, kind of like what we were talking about. Just how do I approach that situation? So. Yeah.
Repeat the question for me, please.
Question is, has a lack of acceptance or knowledge about your identity ever made you reconsider a life goal or plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that me moving up here was a part of really wanting to step into who I was fully without the oversight of my family. Every time I went back, I realized I was becoming more and more masculine presenting, and they saw it. And so I felt good when I was up here, and expressing myself. But when I would start to drive back down, I would slowly be like, oh, well, should I feminize myself a little bit more? And I don't do it no more. And when I did do that, they thought it was weird anyways. So, yeah.
I want to go to college. A lot of people do, but I always fret so much about going somewhere. And it's not the big thing, and it's not people calling me out. It's the smaller little subtle forms of people getting annoyed, or people talking behind their back, or that really make me question sometimes how far I'll go in my education. It's how much do I have to question my own self, and how much do I have to build like a double identity, a new face in new places so people will accept me in a better way? How much do I have to basically whitewash myself? How much do I have to get rid of anything that was like personality-wise that actually is unique? Because that's not what people want. They want a certain version of you all the time, especially when you're queer. They expect one version of what it means to be queer, and it's just very frustrating because it's like, I'm not that. I'm very different. And you keep putting a label on us, and it makes going into educational spaces sometimes hard, and other areas very hard, and makes you question everything a lot of the time.
This question makes me think about just when I came out to my dad. My dad is an immigrant man from Nigeria, and when I came out, he was sort of like, homosexuality is a sin. It doesn't exist in Nigeria. It doesn't exist in my culture, which is ridiculous. But it really put me in this position of feeling like I had to choose between either being a queer person or being Nigerian in some way. And I just think about the ways that has made me kind of doubt myself, or, feel like I can't have all of me at once. And growing up in the U.S., like a hope or goal of mine has been to, spend time in Nigeria and just learn more about my heritage by being there. But because of my queerness, it kind of positions me in this really, at times dangerous, right? It's illegal to be out in Nigeria. You can actually be arrested. And so I just think of the way that like culture and gender or sexuality really intersect. And, I've had to adjust for those reasons.
Can we just take a deep breath right now? Can we just inhale and exhale? And I appreciate you all feeling comfortable to bring yourselves to these conversations. Has the lack of belonging or acceptance ever impacted you financially?
So, I know it's, there's a lot of laws now, or not a lot, but there's rules, restrictions, regulations in a lot of places in California specifically, like against discriminatory, not hiring people, But in a lot of places I've interviewed at, I've found that if I am fully myself, tell them, yes, I, start with the normal stuff, go to school, do this is my name. I do prefer K, and I use they, them pronouns. A lot of the time, I get rejected from that job, regardless of if I have the credentials, if I don't. The job I'm at now, was probably the one I thought I was not going to land, and all the other ones I thought I would. And that was one of the only ones where I didn't come forward and say, I'm gender fluid and I prefer they, them pronouns. And so, no real lack of, I don't have a lack, I don't have a lot of evidence, but, it was just a thing that I was like, wow, that's crazy that they found a way to just be like, nope, we're not going to hire you. We don't really need that. Put me in a hard financial place for a while. So, but I'm okay now. But I found that interesting, how does that affect how I do my work, It's like, I don't know. Yeah, it was crazy to me because I can do my work just like a cis man or a cis woman, but that's an interesting experience.
I think that, I think 2017, I got fired from my job. If you've never been fired, you should try it. Because it's a humbling experience in a sense of you have to dig into yourself differently from that. And the reason why I got fired was because, first of all, I wasn't a good employee. Let me start and be honest. But also, as queer folks, we have different configurations of family. And so at the time, my girlfriend, I was helping her raise her daughter, who's 12 now, and I met the kid when she was 1. And I'm still in her life. Me and my ex are really cool. And so there had been some possible trauma that she was experiencing, the kid, and I could not go to work. And so I was on leave helping my kid go through all these different processes and take her to the doctor and all kinds of stuff. And the Family Leave Act did not cover my configuration of family. And so my job tried for as long as they could possibly to have me be out. And then after a while, they were just like, come to work or else. And I said, well, I'm gonna pick or else. I'm gonna take care of my kid.
I grew up in Berkeley. I was lucky enough to have family who could have a cush life that was very comfortable. But when I went to mental health treatment, I did not really get to experience what it meant to be around people who struggled as much as these kids did. And when you see kids who are from poverty, who are queer, and who are clearly having one of the hardest times you can see in their lives, it becomes just a burden. These kids feel like they have so much on their back because they might not have family on them. The family that does have them is not financially supportive, or they can't support them. And it just means that it just becomes for a lot of these kids like an endless cycle of just, what do I say to my family, what do I not? If I want to go home and I want to be somewhere where I can live a good life and have food on a roof over my house, what do I have to say to do that? To some kids, it was horrible because they would learn to grow more themselves in treatment than they could be at home. And I, in part, was one of those kids who just knew that treatment, they didn't judge you in some ways. But I knew kids who just couldn't. They just couldn't find a judgment-free space, and that meant they would financially struggle. They would be on the streets again. They would have issues like that. And that was so eye-opening, and it taught me a lot about why it's important to acknowledge what we have, what we don't have.
I mean, thankfully, I think I'm struggling to find an instance where I can really directly tie my identity having sort of an impact on my financial reality, but I know friends who, come out and are kicked out of their homes and are homeless, or parents who withdraw support, or, just friends who've experienced harassment in the workplace around their identities, and the conditions are so unbearable that they end up quitting, right, and are unemployed for those reasons. And so, I just think there are so many ways that, beyond just LGBTQ plus identity, but just especially living under capitalism, that this is a real reality for so many of us.
Outside of the people you are close to, who are the people you find it valuable to have acceptance from, to feel like you belong in a space? Outside of the people you are close to, who are the people you find it valuable to have acceptance from, to feel like you belong in a space?
I've learned that no educational spaces are often transformative for people who have a lot of times grown up in places where their education wasn't valued. That for a lot of these people who are queer too, they felt like their teachers sometimes were as important as their parents sometimes. They felt that when they walked into some classrooms, they felt like they could finally just chill, they could relax. They felt like, wow, I don't need to care about being I don't have to care about what I say to my parents. I don't have to have my guardrails up all the time. I knew kids who therapists would be one of the few safe places. And I knew kids in treatment again who would honestly love the staff who worked the places. I loved some of the staff because they treated me like I was like family in a way. They treated me like I was actually not an idiot. They treated me like an adult and they gave me respect. They made me and my identity feel unique, and they respected it, and they didn't question it. They didn't try to make it seem like, it's clearly because of mental health challenges you're queer or something like that my parents have pushed me towards.
So I work 2 jobs right now. I'm blessed to work here at Berkeley City College. Right now I'm an intern with the Basic Needs Center, actually. So I don't know if you know them, but my direct boss is Izzy. Love them. I've found that not only because they share an identity with me, but also just because they're such an accepting and loving person, I can be myself and excel in my job and do the best for everyone that I work with. That's something that I think is really important. Like, especially like my coworkers, even like the people I work with at the Basic Needs Center, the people I work around. Michael, I love you. They all make me feel really comfortable where I am. And so despite not knowing them for very long, I've been able to really do well where I am and grow as a person alongside where I have as like in my work. So I think that's really important.
So, I think for me, my elders. I have a soft spot for my elders, always have. You know, when I'm walking the street, you know, I'm always like moving out the way, giving up my seat. And I just really always love chatting with them and hearing stories from them. And it's important to me that like they know I see them, because that's also an invisible community. And it's important that I connect with them and have them share what they want. You know, one of my goals is to create a senior citizens like club. You know what I mean? And so I just have a soft spot for my elders.
I love that. I think some folks who are coming to my mind are people who I'm like maybe relying on for care or support or putting my trust in. And I think of things like my doctor or my therapist or my supervisor. I think it can feel really hard to feel safe and receive whatever care or guidance or support these people who, in those kinds of dynamics, may kind of be a person of authority to us, like to feel like they aren't accepting of us, but we're still in need of something from them, can be really challenging. And, you know, I work with Janine. She's somewhere here. She's wonderful. But I think if I didn't feel accepted by Janine, our supervisory relationship would be really, really challenging. And so I think just people who I'm relying on for care and support, like to feel accepted by them is important for me.
So in just a minute, we're going to open it up to my folks on the floor so that you have the opportunity to ask some questions. So as you all are thinking and getting that together, my final question to you is that we have a variety of folks in the room. We have instructors and professors and staff and faculty, but we also have parents and siblings and community members and community resources. And so what would be your final message, or what would be a message that you would want them to walk away with from this summit? Like, what do you want them to make sure that they walk out these doors remembering, learning, connecting? What's an important thing for them to know?
I think to parents, especially, don't rely on the assumption that mental health challenges come out of nowhere. Don't rely on the idea that it is just like, oh yeah, my kid's queer all of a sudden. There are very clearly often cases where kids are showing like they're struggling with their identity, or they talk to it with their friends, but you just don't pay attention to it because you are busy. You are a parent. You have a life. You probably have to work a long job just to let the kid live and have food on their table. And it's also to realize that you should pay attention to the much subtler things. That's where things a lot of times will develop. And if a kid is having mental health challenges, it is not going to help to challenge them and say you are not having them, or to say that your challenges are not that significant. It is not going to help to degrade somebody's issues or to call it petty. I think it's important to maybe not just get them help, but be part of their help solution, because you can have all the great staff, you can have all the clinicians, you can have all the social licensed clinical workers. It's not going to make any difference if the home they go back home is not a space that is open and caring and willing to change and adjust to their needs.
You know, mine's real simple. I think what I'm going to tell people is not to get caught up on the acronyms, because they're going to change soon. Right? Language is expanding as we all mature. Like when y'all about 20 years, y'all not going to be able to keep up either. Right? And so I want to say us to be patient with each other. Right? And if someone's really trying, be patient, and know that these acronyms are going to be different next year. So that's what I want to say.
think I just want to do a plug for students here, just do a plug for, the Wellness Center and counseling resources, and just know that, like, if you are needing some support, that we're here. It's free of cost, can receive anywhere between 8 to 10 sessions a semester. So, yeah, just want you to know that resource is there. There might be some QR codes around here, so if you're interested, please don't hesitate.
There's so many resources at Berkeley. This is great. I think open-mindedness, but beyond that, like checking your personal biases consistently. Like, it's something I'm always trying to do, because no matter how like open-minded you think you are, no matter how accepting you think you are, like, you always have biases. And it's so important to constantly check yourself so you're always growing as a person. Yeah, that's it.
That's enough. That is wonderful. Before we pass it back to Lola and give our thanks to our speakers, are there any questions out in the audience?
Hi, this is Angel again. I work in the Office of Instruction. What can we do in the Office of Instruction that oversees faculty, so just in classroom stuff, to make it more inclusive and safe for queer identified individuals?
I think that any safe classroom has to be one built around like a style of like us teaching that is more open to group discussions and discussing how the impact of like whatever the course material it is. Most course materials, if they're within the humanities, can apply to people's lives. And it's talking about, people find it more interesting and more engaging when we talk about how maybe a certain issue applies to our lives, or how do we apply it to our own personal problems. It's important to build a system of communication and a way of learning that is a peer-to-peer basis, because it's not fun to just get lectured at for an hour and have somebody who feels out of touch. It's important to have professors who actually listen to their kids and the kids in the classroom and say, you guys are not engaged, we need to think more about how you guys and what do you guys want to hear. It's going back and forth and seeing each class and what's needed.
Adding to that, personally, I haven't experienced. I've had a pretty good experience here at Berkeley with my professors, but I haven't taken many classes. One of the reasons I came here is because of like the inclusivity. Like, I came from West Contra Costa from high school, so like I commute here every day. But I think at a hiring basis, maybe I know it's not easy to become like a professor at a college level, but I know it's also not very hard to pass certain screenings because of the shortages of educators. So I think if we're really focused on building safe spaces for queer students, then that's something that's really important regardless of numbers. Like, obviously you need teachers, but you also need teachers who care about all their students despite and including their identities. So that.
All right, and if we can give it up for our speakers one last time. Thank you, Ivy, Key, Chinaway, Angela,